Tonight, Russian troops pull back from Ukraine's capital city.
They can regroup, and I think they will want to take the Kyiv in short times.
The latest on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, plus jobs in America.
There have been only 3 months in the last 50 years where the unemployment rate of America is lower than it is now.
The new numbers that signal a healthy workforce. And
I hope it's encouragement. I really hope that will draw them to God to see that He is for you.
We talk with Fox News anchor Shannon Bream about her new book on women in the Bible. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. An urgent evacuation effort underway for the innocent in Ukraine. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Tara Mergener. A warning from the Red Cross. Thousands of lives are at stake if civilians aren't immediately rescued from the besieged city of Mariupol. Trapped for weeks, people there have very little food, no running water, and no electricity. As national security correspondent Caitlin Bork reports in tonight's top story, Russia claims it opened a humanitarian corridor to allow civilians to escape.
According to officials in Mariupol, a convoy made up of private vehicles and 42 buses carrying about 2,000 civilians did get clearance to leave on Friday. But a Red Cross attempt to evacuate more people failed, and they plan to regroup and try again Saturday. About 100,000 people remain trapped in the port city, and aid has not been allowed in.
There's no gas, no electricity, no heating, no cell phone service. We melt snow to have at least something to drink.
Peace talks between Russia and Ukrainian representatives were expected to resume today, even as intense fighting continues. Multiple missiles hitting the capital of Kyiv, despite Russian promises to scale back its offensive there. Ukrainian military officials say some Russian troops are beginning to withdraw north of Kyiv, but President Volodymyr Zelensky warns it's just a tactic to build up strength for new attacks in the east. Ukrainian forces, meanwhile, continue their offensive, taking back 2 villages along a main supply route to the capital. And Moscow claims Ukraine hit an oil depot overnight just inside Russia's border. That accusation is unconfirmed, and Ukraine has not taken responsibility. Russian forces have also handed back control of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant after reports coming that some soldiers may have radiation sickness. Some of those fleeing the war in Ukraine now turning up on America's southern border. About 600 people now waiting at a holding facility in Tijuana, Mexico, hoping to be granted entry. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
And here at home, illegal crossings into the U.S. at the southern border are on the rise. In March, Border Patrol reportedly encountering about 7,500 people a day. That is the highest number in 22 years. The figure's still going up. Agents say at times they're holding 15,000 people a day at border stations. That is leading to large numbers of migrants being released into cities all across the U.S., many with no requirement to ever report back to immigration authorities. Critics say this is a major incentive for human and drug smugglers. And to complicate matters, the Biden administration announced today that starting next month, it will end a COVID policy that's been limiting the flow of asylum seekers to the U.S. The public health order known as Title 42 allows rapid expulsion at the border. And already, Republican senators say the border is out of control. And they're calling on Congress to take action to prevent a catastrophe this spring. Senior National Affairs correspondent Heather Sells has more.
We're seeing an epidemic level of people coming across the border.
The announcement comes as border numbers are already surging. Homeland Security reports more than 7,000 migrants a day, both illegally and at official crossings.
The Border Patrol tell me that if it expires without a plan being put into place to allow them to handle this volume of migrants, they will simply lose control of the border.
On Wednesday, a group of GOP senators warned that ending the order would overwhelm the Border Patrol. pave the way for more illegal immigration and drugs, and worsen an overtaxed system.
There's a 1.5 million person backlog for dealing with asylum claims. 1.5 million. This means that when you are allowed into the country to await an immigration judge looking at your case, there will be anywhere from 4 to 6 years before your case is considered.
Democrats like Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer have called for an end to Title 42, citing the country's pandemic recovery. Immigration advocates like Ali Noorani agree, but warn that more infrastructure and personnel are needed at the border. Noorani says that ultimately the U.S. must undermine the cartels.
The only people that are winning right now are the cartels. If we actually had legal immigration pathways, people would not be relying on asylum as their only way to apply for entry. And frankly, we would be taking away a very lucrative line of business from the cartels.
Noorani says there's reports that lawmakers from both sides of the aisle are talking about immigration reform. With a crisis clearly looming, perhaps Congress will act in time to avert the worst. Heather Sells, CBN News.
And to the American economy, new numbers today from the Labor Department show a strong job market and shrinking unemployment. The report finds the U.S. added 431,000 new jobs in March, and the unemployment rate fell 3.6%. Now, that's just above the February 2020 rate of 3.5%, right before COVID hit. Well, most of the job growth came in the retail, hospitality, and manufacturing sectors of the workforce and sent a signal that more workers feel more comfortable about society returning to normal.
Americans are back to work, and that's good news for millions of families who have a little more breathing room and the dignity that comes from earning a paycheck, just the dignity of having a job. And more Americans get jobs as they do. It's going to help ease the supply pressures we've seen.
Now, despite the encouraging numbers, record inflation and higher costs continue to burden Americans, and the number of job openings around the country remains near record levels. Well, joining me now, CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody and Julia Manchester, political reporter for The Hill. Julia, when you look at the economy as a whole, the job market seems to be doing well, but inflation is soaring. So do you think a good jobs report offsets inflation for voters as we head to the midterms?
No, I don't. Look, I mean, it's great that the job market is soaring, and this is definitely something you are going to hear the Biden administration really try to tout. You heard President Biden say it just there, America is back to work. But the fact of the matter is, even with Americans earning those well-earned paychecks, going to the grocery store, going to the gas station, it's still very expensive. Rent is going up. It's more expensive to buy a home. So, I think you're going to see Republicans continue to dig in on that inflation messaging, because it is something that virtually every single American feels right now.
Yeah, certainly tough on a lot of people. And David, an NBC poll out this week found only 33% of Americans approve of how President Biden is handling the economy, and it found only 40% approve of his job performance overall. Does that have Democrats very worried?
Well, yeah, obviously has them worried. It also has them planning what to do exactly in the future. They know the red wave is coming. I'll be honest with you, 30% approve of his handling of the economy. Who are those 30% in the country? I'd like to talk to them for a moment. I mean, what in the world? I mean, look, here's the problem. It is visceral for people, right? I mean, they have this, they go to the grocery store, they see the prices, as I've mentioned many times on the show, and clearly I'm in therapy over it. I can't get any cream cheese. And so when people see this, they go, enough already. And so therefore, those poll numbers are not just numbers. Those are real emotional, problems that the Biden administration is going to have to deal with, because they're not connecting with voters.
Right. And Julia, the Biden administration, back to immigration, plans to lift the COVID-related immigration ban known as Title 42 in late May. That's the word. How big a factor will immigration be for voters come November? We're not hearing a ton about it right now.
Well, we're not hearing about it right now, but, especially with this Title 42 news breaking just now, I think that's a political gift to Republicans. Just yesterday or a few days ago, the Republican National Committee released a video addressing the issue of, repealing Title 42 and the situation at the southern border. And we know that Republicans have very much been itching to make the situation at the border a major campaign issue. And this appears to help them. Look, Republicans made gains in 2020 despite President Trump losing the election overall. We saw in border communities in Texas and Arizona, for example, Republicans continue to make those gains. And we know that the National Republican Congressional Campaign Committee, the House campaign arm, is very much targeting a lot of those border territories, those border congressional seats, because they know that this issue of immigration seems to be affecting a lot of voters living in that area. So I would say this is a political gift, and I think it's very telling that someone like Senator Mark Kelly, a Democrat from Arizona, is warning the Biden administration, or has warned the Biden administration, not to repeal this law. He's from a border state. He's facing what could be an uphill re-election battle. I think it speaks volumes how he's sort of criticizing or being critical of a decision of the leader of his own party.
Right, and the numbers are already climbing as it is. David, let's talk some hot buttons. From parents protesting at school board meetings to abortion to LGBTQ rights. What role will all of these issues play in the midterms?
Well, they're obviously all huge, but we need to step back for a second, not think of them so much as issues. I mean, we can take one issue at a time, that's fine, but really we're talking about a cultural shift. And that's the problem. Look, it's too much water in the boat for Democrats. This is the problem. I mean, everybody talks about, the LGBT issue or the school rights issue, the parental issues going on at the schools. But if you put it all together, what we're seeing is the left is standing with cultural Marxism. And when you put the two together, you got problems. Look at Disney. Disney is a perfect example. Tens of millions of families go to Disney all the time for vacations. And you've got the left in America standing with Disney on this as it relates to the DeSantis, the bill down there, or the law now. And so, you put it all together, and that is not a tenable situation for Democrats politically. It will hurt them. They will find that out in November for sure.
Well, certainly voters have a lot to digest ahead of those November midterms. Julia, David, thank you so much for your insights. Have a great weekend.
You too.
All right, tourists return to Israel, how one ministry is helping them return to their roots when Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. A group of bipartisan senators is working to finalize a new coronavirus aid package. The plan would cost about $10 billion. That is less than half of the $22.5 billion the White House asked for. Politico reports about half of the $10 billion the Senate is considering would go toward therapeutic medicines that treat COVID. The potential Senate deal would not include $5 billion for international vaccine efforts, a decision drawing criticism from many Democrats on Capitol Hill. And COVID policies have put a damper on international travel for nearly 2 years now. And that includes Israel, where for centuries, believers have visited to find a deeper connection to their faith. And now that the doors are opening back up, those spiritual seekers are starting to return. Chris Mitchell met with one Christian group that recently made the trip.
These pastors got the chance to visit Israel thanks to Eagle's Wings Ministry, a group focused on advancing biblical mandates such as spiritual community.
We are so glad after 2.5 years that we couldn't come back to the land to bring these pastors, almost 30 pastors from all over America, from the UK and from Canada, because we're living in a moment in the Christian church that we're reconnecting to the Jewish roots of our faith and standing in support of the modern state of Israel. And these pastors...
I've been here a few times, but this particular time, it's really touched me not only to, to tap into my Christian roots, but really to tap into the Jewish roots.
For these pastors, a chance to experience the land where the Bible comes alive.
Honestly, it means finding history and bringing it to life for me. We read the Bible constantly. I preach from the Bible. Over these past 9 days, I've actually walked the Bible.
At one point, the group gathered around a piano on the promenade and began spontaneous worship.
I'm gonna build my life on you. I'm gonna build my life on you. I'm gonna build my life on you.
Pastors reflected on how this trip will enrich their ministry, especially first-time visitor, Pastor Joe Reeser.
It's planted a seed. It's made an impact. And I'm convinced of this, there's probably not an area of my ministry, my leadership, my future, my planning, my strategizing that is not going to be impacted by the influence of the land and the people and what God is doing, not just what he has done historically, but what he is doing through this place.
The pastors are having their paradigms shifted. They're having their hearts softened and awakened.
For years, Stearns has led the Day of Prayer for the Peace of Jerusalem, and he says it's more important than ever.
We believe that at least one day a year, the hearts of the global church should turn back to Zion, should turn back and pray for the coming of our King, the return of our King.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
All right, Shannon Bream gives voice to the mothers and daughters of the Bible. The Fox News host tells us what we can learn from their stories next on Faith Nation. The Bible is full of stories about families and their influence. Fox News anchor Shannon Bream explores that topic in her latest book, The Mothers and Daughters of the Bible Speak. It looks at how faith-filled women blessed their families and in some cases changed history. In a recent interview with Jenna Browder, Shannon shared her own mother's faith set the standard that she still aspires to today.
What does it mean to have faith? Shannon Bream explores that in her newest book through the beautiful lens of mothers and daughters.
There's certainly truths all throughout the book that I think will be encouraging to people.
The Mothers and Daughters of the Bible Speak follows up on the success of her last book, The Women of the Bible Speak, a #1 New York Times bestseller.
So talk a little bit about that and then also what led you to write this new book. You know, I think that there was a real hunger and thirst, especially during the pandemic, which is when the first book was written in the real early days when there was so much we didn't know. People felt isolated. They were fearful. Many of them were out of their churches and kind of at home. And I think it was one of those books that it was just full of encouragement and inspiration.
And that's this one, too.
If you think about finances and family and infertility and all of these different things that women faced, they just really translated. So we knew there were still a lot of strong female stories in the Bible that hadn't been told or needed to be elaborated on. So we said, all right, let's plunge into these mother-daughter relationships.
One not so easy task, choosing who to include.
I think sometimes there are easy, obvious ones, like Mary, the mother of Jesus, and in the Old Testament telling of Esther. I think that there are some characters that just jump out at you that have had really big impact. Their stories have been known over time, even for people who don't really know the Bible. They have some interest or some knowledge of their stories. And then others, I think, I try to choose ones that really resonate with me. Some of these are really small stories where we don't even have the name of the woman involved, but maybe there was a miracle or we really saw God's work in their lives when they were desperate and needed him to show up.
Among her favorites.
You know, I have a little place in my heart for all of them. I think they're all special and beautiful. I love the initial story that we have of Jochebed and Miriam, who are the mother of Moses and the sister of Moses, because we have not just one, but two strong, brave women in this story. And I love how we see them work together as mother and daughter, too.
Moses and Miriam, both critical in the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt to the Promised Land, none of which would have been possible without Jochebed's bravery to float her son down the river. One theme throughout the book is the intimate connection between faith and family.
And so many of these stories, too, are people who may not be related by blood, but they become chosen or found family, which I think is all of us coming into the body of Christ, being adopted in. And I love the picture of that.
Think Naomi and Ruth, the mother and daughter-in-law duo. As Shannon points to her own mother as inspiration.
I was really blessed to grow up with a mom who was a bit of a baby Christian when I was little, too. And we almost kind of grew together in that she is the best example I know in my life of somebody who's truly Christ-like. I mean, hands and feet, showing up, not just saying, I'll pray for you and forgetting about it 5 minutes later. I mean, she's on her knees before the sun comes up, praying for people. If you're on her list, it's actually happening. She's the first one to show up when you have a tragedy, if you need a casserole, if you've had a baby, if you're in the hospital. I mean, my mom is the very living embodiment of what we should be, I think, as Christians, respecting other people, whether we agree or disagree with them politically or any other way. I mean, seeing them as God's creation and somebody who is worthy of his love and his mercy, the grace he's extended to us. And then we then model that and give that to other people in our lives. So I've always had a really strong example in my mom. And I'm always telling her when I grow up one day, I want to be more like you. Really, she's reflecting Christ, but I'd love to be more like her as well.
If there's one message she hopes readers take away from this book,
I hope it's encouragement. I really hope that will draw them to God, to see that He is for you in your family squabbles, in your high moments, in your low moments, when you've made bad decisions or good decisions. I mean, He is always present in your life. We see that in these women thousands of years ago, and we know it's true today, that we can see the evidence of that. So know that He came to save, not to condemn, but to give you His overwhelming love, His salvation, and He's just waiting for you to come to Him.
And the book also includes study questions for each chapter, making it a great study of sorts to do with family and friends. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Help and hope for Ukrainian refugees. We go on the ground with CBN's Operation Blessing after this. Finally, tonight, Ukrainian refugees are arriving at the Polish border tired and hungry. Operation Blessing is serving up hot food and drink to these very weary travelers.
Hi, so it's been a week since we started cooking here in Medica, right at the border with Ukraine, on the Polish side, obviously. And so far, we've been cooking hamburgers and hot dogs, quesadillas, making obviously some hot chocolate because it's really cold right now, some chai tea, just spreading the love of our Lord Jesus and showing them that, the world is here for them and we are here to care for them. So I feel very excited. I'm very, very glad that we are having the opportunity to cook for these people as many meals as we can daily. We, as Operation Blessing, feel very, very blessed to be here. Obviously, providing not just a warm meal, but a warm smile, just giving them the feeling of welcoming and complete safety. So I want to thank you, everyone who's been a part of this mission, who's kept them in their prayers, everyone who's been here for not just us, but for Ukrainian people. Thank you. Thank you for allowing Operation Blessing and our beautiful team to be here, spreading the love of Jesus through food. Thank you.
Some great work. And if you'd like to partner with Operation Blessing and help support their work on the ground to provide critical relief to refugees, text OB Crisis to 71777. And that's going to do it for us here at Faith Nation. Have a great weekend. Stay safe out there.